Hi, I'm Domingo. I'm a real estate investor and a licensed realtor, and today I'm going to be covering the top 5 questions that I get for people that are looking to buy a home in Raleigh, North Carolina. The first question that I typically get is, what is Raleigh really like? Are all the videos pretty accurate that you could find on YouTube? But when I get this question, I typically see it as a 2-part question. And part 1 is asking, what's the cost of living like? And then the second part of that is more or less, what is the lifestyle like? Starting with the cost of living, I would say Raleigh's a bit moderate to live at. So if you're coming from a place like New York City, it's going to be substantially cheaper. But then again, if you're in a remote part of, let's say, Alabama, it's going to be quite a bit more expensive. And then on a smaller level, housing prices vary quite drastically whether you're in downtown Raleigh versus one of the outskirts. For example, in the suburbs, a home that costs you roughly $350 to $450K in downtown Raleigh could cost you as much as $750K. As far as the finer details of cost of living, I actually recommend a YouTuber by Travis S. He's a fitness YouTuber, but he did a financial audit of himself and his wife, and they live in the Triangle area, and he goes into pretty good detail about what it actually costs to live here, and I'll link that up here. So as far as the lifestyle part of this answer, I typically find the videos on YouTube, they do a pretty good job giving a general overview, things like pros and cons, neighborhoods explained, things like that. But I would say they don't really accurately depict what the lifestyle is like. And this part could be a bit hard to describe without just showing you. But if I was on a phone call with a friend and I was trying to describe it, I would say that Raleigh is a metropolitan area that is still fairly spaced out. It definitely maximizes the use of greenways, green spaces, things like that. And so you could get a lot of the amenities of being in a city without really running the massive congestion of a place like DC, LA, or New York City. Additionally, it has a super strong job sector with tech and medical. You can see this with the Research Triangle Park, which is located in the center of the triangle, and it's designed to foster collaboration amongst originally the 3 universities, but now just the general job market. So it's very much a hallmark of the Raleigh area. And then lastly, I would note that it's sandwiched between the mountains and the beach. So both of those are accessible within a 2 to 3 hour drive. Yes, it's a bit of a trip, but you could still get there on a day trip. And to this topic, I'm looking at doing a neighborhood vlogging series, so that way I could bring you along and show you what authentically these neighborhoods are actually like. So if that's something you're interested in, just comment below and let me know. So the next question is, what home price can I actually afford? You should aim for your monthly mortgage payment to be about a quarter to a third of your monthly income. In addition to that, you're gonna want 3 to 6 months in reserve to cover any unexpected expenses or in the event that you lose your income. For example, if your monthly income is about $10,000, then you wanna keep your mortgage payment at or below $3,300. And then on top of that, you're gonna want $10,000 to $20,000 in reserve. If you're buying a home, you also wanna make sure you have enough cash to actually handle the transaction of buying a home. For example, if you're buying a home that's roughly $500K, then I would recommend you have $15,000 extra in cash so that you could pay for things like the due diligence fund, earnest money deposit, and then all of the due diligence process and cash to close. And then on top of that, you also have to add the down payment. So in this example, in total, you're gonna want anywhere from $25,000 to $35,000 in cash before the down payment. All right, so the next question is, should I wait for interest rates to lower? The answer to this is, it just depends. It's really pros and cons. Also, nobody could truly predict the future. That being said, one of the most prevailing trains of thought actually uses COVID as the primary lesson. So what we saw during COVID is interest rates dropped significantly, and suddenly it became super affordable to borrow money, and that shot the demand for houses through the roof, no pun intended. And so what you saw is a correlation between lower interest rates and higher housing prices, specifically because it increased the demand for houses relative to the supply. The reason why that matters to you today is you're faced with making a decision under the assumption that this same relationship is true, whereas if you wait to buy, the housing prices might go up, so you're not really saving any money. Whereas under this theory, if you buy now and interest rates drop, at that point you could refinance and then you're going to capture a ton of equity while also still gaining the lower interest rate. Now the key word is that this is technically an assumption, right? It's a very well educated, well backed assumption. But at the end of the day, if you can't afford the home right now as the interest rate stands, then you're either gonna have to buy cheaper or just wait. In other words, just don't buy more than you can afford. All right, so the next question is, when should I buy? This is also a pros and cons answer. So first we're gonna start as if you're on a fixed timeline. And for example, like let's say you have to move over summer and start a new job in August, so it's a hard deadline. In this case, I would leverage that 2-month period when you close on a home where you're not making mortgage payments as your ideal window for buying. So using the same August example, this would put the ideal closing time in June timeframe, and typically it's a 30-day contract to close, which means you're going under contract in May, which then means you're searching for homes starting in April. So in short, you're taking your target time and then back it off 4 months, and that's when you should start at the very latest searching for your home. All right, so if you're not on a specific timeline and you could afford to wait, then it's also important to know that real estate is a very seasonal industry. Specifically, spring and summer tend to be the busy seasons. This is when a lot of people are moving for new jobs or for school reasons, things like that. And then fall and winter tend to be the slower seasons. With the busy season, you typically see higher inventory, but also higher prices and more competition. And then in the slow season, you tend to see less inventory, but there's also less competition, and you could probably get a better bargain deal during this time. Just know that because of that fact, a lot of investors are on the lookout for a good deal during this window. For example, like have a home acquired, renovated, and ready to sell come spring and summer time frame. All right, so this last question I actually get a ton, and it's, should I still buy if I don't plan on settling here? And I think I probably get this a lot just because of my military background, and I work with a lot of military clients. But the way that I would answer this is you really have to just focus on what your priorities are. For example, if your priorities are work or social life, and you really don't want to focus on any housekeeping stuff, then okay, well, maybe you just rent and save money for the next place where you're going to be settling down. And on the other hand, you could take this as a learning opportunity in either the home buying process, or let's say you're trying to slowly develop an investment portfolio and you can integrate the properties you once lived in as your rental properties. And this is also a good opportunity. So again, it's based on what you prioritize, but let's say you do buy a property and you still plan on moving within 2 to 3 years. Here's a couple exit strategies that you should be considering. As far as selling, most of your money that you're going to make is in your appreciation, but you do have a window since you're living there to do some improvements on your own over time. You save some money doing it while still adding value to the home. There's also a major tax opportunity when it comes to your primary residence. If you're selling a property and you lived in it for 2 out of the past 5 years as your primary residence, then you qualify for this opportunity. In short, you're tax exempt for $250,000 of capital gains per person. So if you're married, that's up to $500,000 of capital gains. Now, you're not going to experience that kind of appreciation in that short of a time. But for example, if you bought a home for $100,000 and then you're married and then you sold it for $600,000, then that $500,000 of capital gains, which is a tax that you would pay on investments, is now tax exempt. And so this sort of leads into the second exit strategy, which is renting. So if you live in a property for 2 years and then you rent it out for 2 years, you could use that 5th year to sell it and still qualify for the tax exemption. That being said, one of the hardest parts about having a high interest rate is that it makes cash flowing from a rental property extremely difficult. So nowadays with high interest rates, the way that I recommend you look at it is I'm going to rent the property out to subsidize my mortgage payment, and then through a long-term buy and hold strategy, which is appreciation and equity, then I'm going to make my profits on the back end. And then in the future, if interest rates drop and you refinance, then you could start looking at this property as one of a cash flowing portfolio. And the thing about renting is you could still sell the home at any point, even if a renter's living there. Now, you can't break their lease unless they also agree to leave, but you're not stuck to having to rent. Now, the person who's buying the property from you has to honor the lease, but you as the owner, your hands are not tied. You still have flexibility and options. So tying it all together, even if you plan on not settling down here, you still have the options to sell or rent on the back end, and you're not stuck in this one home that you buy. All right, well, those are all the questions, and I hope you all learned something, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.